Network. And welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. To Los Angeles we go. And I don't know if many of you are aware that in 1990, the year before the fall of the Soviet Union, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the seventh Lubavitch Rebbe, dispatched Rabbi Baruch Shlomo Cunin of Los Angeles to Moscow to retrieve thousands of Jewish books and manuscripts, some centuries old, that the religious volumes and correspondence belonged to the Chabad Lubavitch movement. His son, Rabbi Yossi Cunin, is with us right now to talk about what happens with the books. I know the judgment against Russia, and they're trying to get back their books that are still being held in Russia. So, Rabbi Cunin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I know you have people from all over the world on your show tonight. So here it is. So we're talking about here. Go ahead.
And we're also live on YouTube. Anybody who can watch us on YouTube as well. So what happened? I know your father was involved in struggling by the Rebbe get the books back. How many? I know there's over 12,000 books, all kinds of correspondence. Some are very old, as I mentioned. Tell us about the collection. Then let's look at what the status of it is today.
Okay, so the collection starts out in about 1984. The Rebbe approaches my dad in New York in 770 and tells him that he has two friends in California who can help him out with a library that was left in Russia that he would like to have retrieved. One of them was the Hollywood producer Jerry Weintraub, the Karate Kid. That was his movie, and there was another.
As far as part of your father's telethon.
Yeah, part of the Chabad telethon, exactly.
That's what the Cunin name is very famous. People know the Chabad That's the granddaddy of all the Jewish telethons.
There you go. So, yeah, he had. So there it was. Jerry Weintraub, who would host the show. He was watching the a satellite and a Yutes Kislev Farbringen, and this is in Malibu. He was in Malibu watching the Rebbe on the satellite, and he called my father up after watching it. He says, "When you call the Rebbe and tell him I got his message," and that was pretty strange for my father. Call the Rebbe up and tell him he's got his message. But sure enough, my father was in New York that day, and the Rebbe calls my father in and says, "You know this guy Jerry Weintraub?" He tells him, "I want you to get involved with him and get." And he told him the whole story about the library of books that was left in Russia. And this library of books that was left in Russia goes back to 1915, and the First World War. The town of Lubavitch was in the crossroads of the war, of World War I. And this is the fifth Chabad Rebbe, takes his library, most of his books, about 12,500 books, and puts them into storage in Moscow. The most precious of books, handwritten notes, and let's say the Baal Shem Tov Siddur and other things of that sort, would never put into storage, but everything else was put into storage. And there it was in 1920 when the sixth Rebbe took over. The Yevasexia, the Jewish Communist Party, made a special effort, especially to get rid of any Torah study throughout the Soviet Union or the Bolshevik Revolution, culminating to the 1927 when they had the previous Rebbe sentenced to death. In 1927, in fact, this is the week, Gimel Tammuz, which is known as the Hilula of the Rebbe, is also the day that in 1927, the sixth Rebbe was released from prison and put into exile, if you would, until the 12th day of Tammuz. However, he was able to escape the Soviet Union, resettle in Riga, Latvia, and the big part of his library was left in Russia. The very most sacred books he took with him, everything he didn't put into storage, but they wouldn't let him take his stuff out of storage and bring it back with him and take it out with him.
All the books, so you say some of the books were in storage, some books were not in storage.
Yeah, correct. And the one that was not in storage, he takes with him to Riga, Latvia. He takes it out with him to Otavutsk, which was right outside of Warsaw. And when the first bombs hit, September 1st of 1939, the Rebbe goes into Warsaw with his library that he still had with him, and miraculously he was rescued from Warsaw. It's a whole story in of itself.
A show about it was the United States, the CIA, with a former Gestapo officer. That there's a whole miracle how the Rebbe escaped, the bombings and everything else. But it was the CIA, the forerunner to the CIA, I believe, together with the former Gestapo members. But that's a whole interesting other story. Yes.
Yeah, how he was able to get out of Warsaw. That they sidestepped the German Wehrmacht rescued him by sidestepping the Gestapo and bringing out Rabbi Schneerson, which is the craziest of all stories. And that there was a second part of the library which was left in Warsaw. So a second part of the
which is Poland. So what happened
which
with
is in
that
Poland.
part? Did the Russians take it, or are just still there? What happened to those books?
Well, in the 1970s, the Polish government had a big part of their Schneerson archive that they returned. It was Holocaust looted artifacts. Rabbi Shem Tov, together with Jerry Shostak, they arranged to have that part of the library that was looted by the Nazis during World War II out of Warsaw. That was returned, what they found in Poland. But there was still a big part of that was still missing, and of that Polish archive of the Rebbe's library that was not to be found, and it was thought to have been destroyed. So here it was.
So what
So
happened? So it wasn't destroyed, is what you're telling me.
It wasn't destroyed. So there's two parts of the library. There was one part of the library that was left in the Soviet Union, if you will, and the other part which was thought to have been destroyed up until 2004. And in 2004, I'm in California. I get a phone call saying that they discovered the archive of Rabbi Schneerson in Moscow. And I said, that's impossible. I know about this. We've been working on this from the early 1990s. In fact, we went to Russian court. We got victories in the Russian court and everything like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? They said, no. There's an archive of that started off as Nazi looted artifacts that Hitler preserved, the big part of the library, that he was going to create and build a museum about the Jews after World War II.
It's called the Museum of the Extinct Race. Hitler wanted to have a museum, so he figured all Jews would be killed. He wanted to have a library. He wanted to have a whole museum of the extinct Jewish race, which would have Jewish artifacts. So you're saying that the Schneerson collection was part of the Hitler's library that he wanted to put after the war, or the museum he wanted to put together after the war.
That's correct. He had that set aside for that. Stalin looted it. He had this army brigade that went into Germany, into Poland, and looted everything they can loot and bring it into Russia. And they had the archive of the Russian military. They brought it into there, and we only first found out about it in 2004. So sure enough, we wrote a letter to President Putin, and we wrote a letter to him asking him to return Nazi looted artifacts. The first part of the collection, which was during the Bolshevik Revolution, was always a tricky situation because it was hard to go back to what happened during the Bolshevik Revolution and figure out what the Bolsheviks stole from who. They stole from everyone. And we used all the diplomatic ties we can to be able to move forward and get what the Bolsheviks looted, again, back in the 1920s, to have that return. We were successful. In 1993, Vice President Al Gore, on his first trip to Russia, he walked into the Russian State Library and they returned to him a Tanya that was published in 1900, the first time the Tanya was published in one book, the 5 sections. That Tanya was given back, and we were able to bring that to the Rebbe, although the Rebbe was suffering from his stroke, but there it was. That one Sefer Tanya was brought back to the Rebbe. A month later, President Clinton brings back another 7 books on Air Force One that we made its way to the Rebbe's office in 1994. So we did have success for all those people who said, well, the Bolsheviks will never return anything, or the communists.
Were those all the books that the Bolsheviks took? You mentioned only 8 books. Were there more?
12,500.
So what happened to the rest of them? So you got 7 of them. Where's the rest of them from the Bolshevik Revolution?
They're still out there in Russia, and where
in Russia are they?
Well, there's the strangest of everything, and is that well, I was telling you about the fact that Hitler had this idea of building a museum of where he put the books. Well, about 7-8 years ago, perhaps more than that, more like 10 plus years ago, President Putin donated 1 year of his salary to build, and wait for this one, to build a museum of tolerance.
And what's in the Museum of Tolerance? The Rebbe's books.
The Nazi looted artifacts and this museum of tolerance.
So there are 2 parts of this collection. The part that the Nazis had is now in the Museum of Tolerance in Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff in the Bolshevik Revolution, you don't know where all the rest of the books are.
Parts of that are in there as well. Parts of that is in there. Yeah, not all of it, but parts of it are in there.
So the part that's not in there, where are they? I'm just trying to ascertain. Do you know where the rest
Yeah.
of the ones that are not part of there?
Yeah, there's certain books that just don't have any value for them to be able to catalog and put. So they were just left, in storage boxes, if you would, for many, many years. And I don't know if they ever took them out of the storage boxes. There's certain books that are considered to be of museum quality, that they would keep in the museum. Maybe of the maybe about 200 of them are considered to be of the 12,500 of museum quality. And then they have handwritten books, about 180 or so handwritten books that they don't have in that museum. So what's in this Museum of Tolerance is basically a regular sperm, if you would, that don't have any special, outside of it belonging to the Rebbe's. It doesn't have any special value to it.
And those books, the majority are storage, and only some of them are displayed in the Museum of Tolerance in Moscow.
Correct. Correct.
Our guest, Rabbi Yossi Cunin from Los Angeles. Father, Rabbi Shalom Cunin, was instructed by the Rebbe to get his books out from Russia, and is still there. We'll talk about some of the stuff that's taking place and what there's being done to try to get the books from Russia, especially now it's engaged in a war with Ukraine, which means it's probably even tougher to get those books out. Rabbi Yossi Cunin from Los Angeles is our guest. If you'd like to call in, our numbers are 212-769-1925, 212-769-1925. Email zev@talklinenetwork.com, zev@talklinenetwork.com. Please put your name, address, phone number, and put down in the byline, Doodle Fisher Concert. Doodle Fisher Concert we're giving away today, Sunday, 3 o'clock, Museum of Jewish Heritage. You want a pair of tickets? Send me an email, zev@talklinenetwork.com.
If you're on Medicaid, the Essential Plan, or Child Health Plus, these programs will no longer renew automatically. Here's how to stay covered. Start by updating your contact information on your health insurance account. Then look for your renewal notice and respond by your renewal deadline. For expert help with renewing your health insurance or more information, visit nyc.gov/health/health coverage.
New York City is now using ranked choice voting in primary and special elections for all city offices. Ranked choice voting allows you to rank up to 5 candidates. To vote, pick your first choice and completely fill in the oval next to their name under the first column. Rank at least one candidate in up to 5. Ranked choice voting will be used in the upcoming primary on Tuesday, June 27th. Early voting runs from Saturday, June 17th to Sunday, June 25th. To learn more, go to nyc.gov/democracynyc.
Do you need an interpreter to help you vote? You have the right to bring an interpreter, like a friend, family member, or poll worker, to the voting booth in the June primary election. Early voting is June 17th to 25th, and Election Day is June 27th. The Civic Engagement Commission will have interpretation services available at select poll sites during the last weekend of early voting and on Election Day. Learn more at nyc.gov/democracynyc.
Coming to Brooklyn? Are you looking for a comfortable and convenient place to stay in the heart of Borough Park? Look no further than the Avenue Plaza Hotel and Conference Center. Our hotel offers spacious rooms with all the amenities you need for a comfortable stay. And with our complimentary kosher American breakfast, kitchenette, and Wi-Fi, you'll feel right at home. Our conference center is perfect for your next business meeting or event. So, whether you're coming to Brooklyn for business or personal reasons, Avenue Plaza Hotel and Conference Center is the perfect choice for your next stay. Located at 4624 13th Avenue in Borough Park. For more information, call 718-552-3200. That's 718-552-3200.
So jeden dem Wort, du bist mein Ort.
Celebrate Israel's 75th with the great Dudu Fisher in concert. Sunday, June 18th, 3 p.m. at the Museum of Living Jewish Heritage, Battery Place, Manhattan. Netflix Rough Diamond star Dudu Fisher performs a marvelous medley of melodies in multiple languages. Hear Dudu sing Sunday, June 18th at 3 p.m. For tickets, Go to Museum of Jewish Heritage at mjhnyc.org or call 646-437-4202. That's 646-437-4202. Dudu Fisher, Sunday, June 18th at 3 p.m. at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York.
I'm always in need of a peaceful start to the day. As the sun is rising, my Anderson windows warm the room as I rejuvenate and find my zen. The natural light brings me energy. I'm a self-expressionist. See more at andersonselfexpressionist.com. Love the life you see.
Available at Greater Windows and Doors at 1302 60th Street in Borough Park. Call them at 718-972-2626. Greater Windows has been serving the community for over 30 years. Commercial and residential accounts welcome. Online at greaterwindows.com.
Tobacco companies don't want you to hear this ad. Nope, they don't want you to know that every New Yorker can get free help from an amazing quit coach to help you start quitting and cheer you on. And they definitely don't want you to know that you can get free and safe nicotine medications like patches and lozenges that can help you reduce your urge to smoke. They don't want you to know because medications and a quit coach can double your chance of success. Call 1-866-NY-QUITS or visit nysmokefree.com today. Go ahead, you can do it.
Did you know that New York City families speak over 180 languages? Good news for parents. All public schools in the city provide translation services and interpreters for meetings. You can request translation for report cards, special education documents like IEPs, and interpretation for your meetings with teachers and staff. For more information, visit schools.nyc.gov/hello or call 311.
Hey, this is Alan Dershowitz. One of the most important Jewish institutions in the world today is Talkline with Zev Brenner. He is so smart and he is so innovative and he has so many interesting guests. I don't know what Yiddishkeit, I don't know what New York, I don't know what the world would do without Zev. So Zev, Yasher Koach, may you go from strength to strength and keep informing us and educating us and keep fighting for Jewish values.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back. Rabbi Yossi Cunin is our guest from Los Angeles. His father was instructed by Lubavitcher Rebbe to get back his books. I'm talking about Rabbi Baruch Shlomo Cunin, who's most famous for the Chabad telethons. But the Rebbe instructed him before the fall of the Soviet Union, 1990, to get the books back. Over 12,000 volumes, a part of collections being held by Russia today. By the way, Rabbi Cunin, what year is the telethon? I know it's been going on every year for so many years.
1982.
1982. Wow, it's the longest running Jewish, I think, telethon in the country. Correct?
That is correct.
Have you?
Quite a deal of.
I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Quite a deal of Hollywood stars would come on that show. Back in the day, Whoopi Goldberg, you'd have just the whole slate of Hollywood on when there was only 3 channels around before cable TV. There was nothing else but to watch the Chabad telethon at the time. But now with all the different media sources and outlets, TV is not the same as it was back in the time. But there it was before cable TV.
But you're still doing the telethon, and you're still.
Oh yeah, of course, it's
right?
still on. Yeah, it's still on, of course. But I'm saying it doesn't get the same type of traffic when there's only 3 channels to be watched, and there it was. Everybody in town, there was nothing else but to watch the Chabad telethon at the time.
You know what the solution is? You got to appear on multiple channels at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's you got to watch it, but you're also on streaming and as well as TV. So
of course, now you got 20 different outlets of how you get how you get your information. Yeah, but back then it was TV had a different piece of the pie, if you would.
Did you ever go on the telethon talking about the books that the Russians are holding?
Oh yeah, I mean, my dad would talk about it with Jerry Weintraub. Bob Dylan was on the show, talking about getting the library back. Mordechai David put together a song, "Let My Books Go."
Play that on there. Okay, had I known, I would have played it on the air. Wow.
There you go.
So here you are. You have all these books that Russia's holding today. Now you've gone to court regarding it. So tell us about the court proceedings.
Yeah, so the court proceedings was initiated when we found out that they had 30,000 pages of Nazi looted artifacts, of pages of archiving material in the Soviet Union, and sorry, in Russia, that's never been known to us, and they would not return those 30,000 pages, and that was going against international law. It was going against. They had no claim, to hold on. Chabad was never at war, if you would, with Russia, that they're holding on to it as looted artifacts or war booty that they needed reparations for, from Chabad for it. So it went smack against all the agreements that the Russians had signed with the U.S. That if they ever had anything that belonged to Holocaust survivors, that they would return it. Just so you know, throughout the Soviet Union, Jews were not allowed to talk about the fact that there were 6 million of us that perished, because the only thing that you can talk about in the Soviet Union was the great patriotic war about what the Soviets what their sacrifice was. About 20 million plus of their countrymen died, so there was not going to be a discussion about what happened to the Jews, if you would, and therefore they didn't make much of the fact that they had things that belonged to Holocaust survivors, because who was to recognize that there was even a Holocaust, during the Soviet Union? You could not get out there and say that. But there it was, when they refused to return the library, the archive. That's when we initiated legal proceedings. But before that, we had a big conference of rabbis that came to Moscow, met with Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Feller from Minnesota,
and Rabbi Chabad. He's the chief rabbi of Russia.
Yeah. So we met with Rabbi Lazar out there, the chief rabbi. So thank you very much, Rabbi Lazar, the chief rabbi of Russia, and we met with him there. Rabbi Feller, Rabbi Bogomilsky. He flew out from New York. We had a whole team that came out there and met with him, and he said he did the best he can to talk and negotiate with the Russian government. But that one just,
the government claimed that there's some Jewish federation that's also has some access or control of the museum.
Very good. So this Museum of Tolerance, where they have this book, the collection, it's that they have the big building in it, which is built by the Jewish Federation of Russia. But where the library is actually held, inside that building, it's the only ones who have control and access to it, not access, but control of it, are the Russian state library officials. Not one of them is not one of them is Jewish in it. So you'll see them holding books upside down like this. They couldn't read it because they don't trust any card-carrying Chabadnik more in Russia more than they would trust me.
So what you're saying is that the Museum of Tolerance is housed in the Jewish Federation building, but the museum itself is controlled by non-members of the Federation of Access. It's controlled by the Russian government.
Not the museum itself, but the library itself, the actual books.
Library within the museum.
With the museum, the actual books itself, they will not. When they go to sleep at night, it's some Ruski guy who has the key to those books. They have not transferred the books to the control of the Chabad community in Moscow. They have not. So if you want to go in there,
yeah. So where are you holding legally?
I'm sorry, we're holding legally. So legally now, in 2004, we filed a lawsuit against Russia. Russia appeared this is in the D.C. District Court in Washington, D.C. And Nat Lewin, Marshall Grossman, our attorneys at the time, Nat Lewin is still involved with it. And we filed a lawsuit. And for 4 years, from 2004, this is in the D.C. District Court, federal court in Washington, D.C. For 4 years, the Russian government fought jurisdiction. So they appeared in court. They spent millions of dollars defending themselves, and they lost. And they lost in court. And when the day they lost in court, they decided that they will not appear anymore to the court anymore. They do not recognize the U.S. court. So from that day, they called in the U.S. ambassador at the time to Moscow. They called him into the foreign ministry in Moscow. They told him to come into the foreign ministry. And they showed him where all the pages of the lawsuit were, and they asked him to take all the paperwork out with him back to the U.S. Embassy because they don't recognize U.S. courts.
So
That's
what did
after.
he do? Did he take
I'm
the
sorry,
pa-
what?
Did he take
He had to take it all back with him. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to sound funny with it, but they said, like, make sure that that door doesn't hit you on the way out. But they,
so they don't recognize the jurisdiction of American courts. So you continuously proceeded. So what was the status of the case?
so what happens is it's in 2010, that's 2008. In 2010, they get a default judgment against the Russian Federation, demanding that they return the entire library and the archives. So the library of 12,500 books that were left during the Bolshevik Revolution, and the 30,000 pages of Nazi-looted artifacts that Hitler was going to build his museum up, that Stalin brought into Russia, discovered in 2004, now to be returned, all now belonging to the Chabad movement. This whole,
So it belongs to the Chabad movement. So how much now is there a monetary damage as well?
right. So how are you ever going to get it out of Russia, right? It's in Russia, and now how are you going to get these books out? So they were found in contempt of court. And the day that the Russia got a judgment against them, they decided to call back all of their loan artwork that they have in the United States, force majeure. They decided that they have an unfriendly country that has now come up with a ruling against Russia. They were worried about getting their artifacts attached in the U.S. So all the loaned artworks, everything that was out for a loan against here in the United States, was called back to Russia immediately. And the same thing, the U.S., all U.S. museums called back their artwork from Russia. And ever since 2010, there's been no artwork loaned between Russia and the United States. And this is about $100 million business per year. Not so much.
Does Russia want to hold on to these artifacts so much? What is the motivating factor, considering that President Vladimir Putin has a good relationship with Israel, with the Jewish community, and from what I understand, he has a good relationship with Chabad?
Absolutely. He has a great relationship with the Jewish community, a great relationship, with Chabad out in Russia. Why he does not want to return it, that is a great question. And I would leave that for Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin to answer that. He did talk about this library of books, and he said, pity, when he opened up the museum, he was there to open it. He said, pity that religion was destroyed in Russia back in the Bolshevik Revolution because of the communist regime that destroyed it. And he says, and he goes on to say, most of the communist regime at the time were Jewish. So there you have it. He's blaming the Jews for the looting of their own artifacts right in front of everybody. You can't make this stuff up. It's almost like, they're calling Zelensky a Nazi and calling Hitler a Jew, and now in front of all the Chabad community telling them that they were the cause for the looting of their own books.
So what did Chief Rabbi Lazar, did he speak to President Putin about this?
Well, I'm sure he would, I cannot imagine him being in any more of a better situation than Jews living in Iran. There's about 15,000 Jews in Iran. The only difference between Moscow and Iran is in Iran, you don't have anybody standing outside the synagogues with machine guns, because for whatever reason, they don't feel as threatened as Jews in Russia do, where they have, if you go in front of the synagogue, or throughout Europe for that matter, you have people with machine guns. But Jews live pretty peacefully today in Iran. And the same, in fact, Rabbi Lazar has made trips to Iran and been able to engage the Jewish community in Iran in a good way. Unfortunately, Jews in Russia are subject of the Russian government, like in Iran. You're just subjects of the Russian government. You're subjects of the Iranian government. And I support Chabad being in Russia. They should be in Russia. Chabad is all around the world. Chabad's been there throughout the Soviet Union. Even when it was illegal to teach your children Torah, the Rebbe made sure that they had Chabad out there all the time. The difference this time,
And I was going to say, with the war going on in Ukraine, I'm sure it was never on the top priority list of President Putin. I'm sure it's way at the bottom because he has a whole war to deal with. So your books is not something which is anywhere near a concern to him?
Well, I'm not worried about what's his concern or not, or what's our, I know what the Rebbe's concern is. And the Rebbe writes in his letter, this is to Jerry Shostak in the 1970s when he was able to retrieve part of the Nazi looted artifacts from Poland. He says these books, no matter how well cared for they are in prison. No matter no matter how they're treated, so long as they're away from their home, they're in prison. And he made it quite clear, unequivocally clear, that his books belong back where the Rebbe set up his home on 770 Eastern Parkway, Brooklyn, New York. And there was no other place that these books would feel comfortable but in their home setting. And the Rebbe goes on to talk about how this is pidyon shvuim. This is like rescuing people who have been held captive. These books, not in the right place, are the souls of the neshamas of the tzaddikim that read and have written their notes in it. He didn't hold any punches as to what these books meant to him. Both the Frierdiker Rebbe did read about his books, how important they were to him, and to the Rebbe, how important they were to him. So it's really a privilege to be involved in getting these books back.
Right, but there's nothing in the imminent future which gives any indication that Russia is going to say, "Hey, Rabbi Cunin, we're giving you back the books."
Well, as strange as it sounds, this past Thursday, we retrieved, are you ready for this? We brought back 8 pages of the archive that has been looted out of Germany into Russia. We just brought them back into 770 on Thursday afternoon.
So where do these pages come from?
Well, as strange as it sounds, but in 2009, we discovered on the auction in Israel that they were auctioning part of the Nazi looted artifacts in Israel. So we had evidence that this came from Russia. So as important as these books are for the Russian government, for whatever strange reason, many of them have found themselves outside of Russia. Either they're selling them, people are stealing them out, which is ridiculous. But we've been able to repatriate some of that library, but in that fashion. But how are we going to ever get it back? Good question. Let me answer that question for you. So in 2013, Judge Lambert decided, he said, you know what? Enough. Every day that you don't return the library, it's $50,000 a day.
A fine for Russia.
A fine for Russia. So like, like holding the books, library card, who knows what not, $50,000 a day. And that in 2014, Ron Lauder, some Russian oligarch, Mikhail Friedman, members from the Russian government all got together in Helsinki, and they said, we want to bring an end to this. Can we make some arrangement where we're going to have some type of exchange with the U.S. and they'll return us the library? Well, that fell through, but they have taken note of this fines that have been occurring now, and now they're up to 178 million as of February, 178,800,000. And with that, what we have done is our attorney Steve Lieberman, Bob Parker out in Washington, D.C., they've found assets here in the United States that they're putting a lien on. And that lien will sit on those assets until someone has a little bit of sense in their head, decide these books that are absolutely no use to the Russian government. If there was a use, they wouldn't be finding themselves on the market sold. That these books do not add up to what they're being fined for, and this library will be returned. So that's what we're after now, after assets that Russian government has an interest in, that at one point or another, they'll wake up and smell the coffee, if you will, and decide that these books have no use for them and return it. The problem with
your problem is what?
No, the problem with dealing with the Russian government is they don't know what they want. So when they don't know what they want themselves, then there's nothing to talk about.
Who made the final decision? Is it Vladimir Putin who wants
it? It's Vladimir Putin. I've been working with members of the Russian Chabad, Russian Jewish community, most notably the head of the Russian Jewish community there. And during the Trump administration, we had this whole arrangement where there was a whole, the Bolsheviks sold the Tsar's law library. The Tsar, I don't know what kind of library the Tsar had, but he had a law library that was sold and made its way to the Library of Congress. And we got a sign off from the Trump administration that they would return that in exchange for the Schneerson collection. But the Russian government just decided, well, they don't need the Tsar stuff. I don't know what they decided. but they sent me back about a 5-page letter explaining to me the weight, how much the physical weight of these books are and how much the physical weight of that book. I'm like, the Drea cup, but they don't, because they don't know what they want. They can't read it, but if it's important to you, that's important enough for them to keep it.
Rabbi Yossi Cunin from Los Angeles, part of the Chabad in LA, trying to retrieve the Rebbe's books. Continues. You should have success in getting the books back, and hope you come back to us very soon and say we've got it. But you have your work cut out for you, that's for sure.
I'm doing a campaign now, a $1 million campaign, charity campaign. Look out for it, and that's to be able to fund our legal proceedings that we have, be able to attach Russian assets around the world until we're able to pry open this door and get those books back.
Don't the Russians have a lot of assets in Israel? A lot of property in Israel?
Oh, you're touching on a great subject. They do. They have.
Are you going? But maybe trick it to get the Israeli government to sign off on it.
Well, the Israeli government knows very well they should not be mixing into the judicial branch of government, don't they?
I don't know. I'm not sure if they want to tackle it, but you got your work cut out for you, that's for sure. Well, multi-front. But Rabbi Yossi Cunin,
that'll be for another time. Okay. Cheers to you.
Have you back. Thank you.
Okay, be well. Bye.
Rabbi Yossi Cunin here on the Talkline Network. When we come back.